Ember Witch. Book 1. The Lich. Volume 1. Black Tragedy. Chapter 2. The Nightmare Begins. September 8, 457 to October 17, 458 BME. Fragment 7. Clan Sister. Vera was finally able to lay down. She had been training all day getting prepared for her job. She had reached her bed, taken off her boots, and dropped onto the soft fur ball. To call it a bed was a disservice to beds. This was a sack stuffed with feathers and made from dozens of different colored furs, each different in texture and softness, making some spots more comfortable than others. The room she lay in had been carved from stone and dirt, with small squared shelves cut into the walls for her clothes, tools, bottles, books, and everything else she had to her name. As a member of the Cynder, she traveled a lot, so she didn't keep much. Just a few books related to various forms of magic, combat, and poisons. All of her clothes were tight-fitting black and gray bodysuits and cloaks. Each bodysuit had pockets upon pockets. They all served a purpose. Knives, swords, poisons, arrows, and other tools related to her work. She was about to fall asleep, but was interrupted by Neela, who entered with a huge smile.
"What do you want? I was just about to fall asleep."
"I have found something you will be extremely interested in."
"Oh, and what would that be? Let me guess, a job? No, a new book? Whatever it is, can't it wait until the morning?"
"Remember how you wanted to see a living lion?"
Neela asked with a huge grin.
"You found one? How in the gods did you manage that?"
Vera asked, sitting up quickly with excitement.
"Awake now, I see. I happened upon him on my hunt. Unfortunately, there was no sign of my mark, but I didn't come back empty-handed. He's up at the Black Sun right now."
"You put him there? That's the most expensive inn of all Myopia. The Morden isn't paying for that, is she?"
Vera questioned, putting emphasis on expensive.
"I paid out of pocket for it. Poor thing has been through a lot in the past months. Figured he deserved a bit of luxury before coming to this hole,"
Neela answered with honesty.
"You gave him a slice of luxury just before he has it taken away from him. That's honestly cruel of you,"
Vera said, looking deeply into Neela's eyes.
"You never have put kindness forward. At least I have the heart to give someone more than a sarcastic compliment,"
Neela said, putting Vera in her place.
"So what now? I assume you wouldn't be telling me this unless I had a part to play,"
Vera said, pushing off the insult.
"You are going to train him,"
Neela replied, walking to the shelf of books, examining each one.
"Are you serious? Why would I need a partner?"
"Because you have yet to get over Hana, even Kaisha can see it. You need to learn to move on, to grow and survive,"
Neela said as she picked up a book and flipped through the pages.
"For the love of Cetra, I don't care what she says,"
Vera said, getting up from her bed and striding to Neela, ripping the book from her hands.
"It's out of my hands at this point,"
Neela said, then walked to the door.
"You need to let go of her, Vera, for all of our sake,"
she said, then closed the door. Vera sneered at the door, then placed the book back on the shelf and went back to her bed. Fevra was awoken by a knock on the door and sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes.
"Come in,"
he called out in a groggy voice. The same two young male firemen entered with a smaller yet still sizable meal, gave him their thanks with a bow, and left him to his breakfast. He was having a hard time deciding what to eat first, but eventually settled on a sweet rice ball, stuffed with fruits. After being satisfied by his meal, he laid back down, trying to get just a little more sleep. He slept fine last night, but he had stayed up rather late, going over and over in his head what his future would hold. He knew that he was getting into something he didn't understand completely. From the information Neela had given him, he was to be an assassin of sorts. He would hunt down criminals and silence them. He would operate under the law, but be outside of it as well. He didn't understand exactly how this would work, but he knew if he got caught he would surely be imprisoned for his crime. His head was spinning just thinking about how exactly he was to move forward. He had no idea if he would even be cut out for this line of work. Yes, he killed before, but only animals for food. He didn't want to think that the deaths of his pack mates were his doing because of that damn black blade. He just laid there trying to let go of his past. The images of his pack mates' corpses haunted his every moment. Worse yet was the image of his brother. He didn't want to think of it, but he couldn't stop. It went with him no matter how far he was from the forest. Was it the gods' doing, or was it just terrible luck they had been in the same place as that horrible thing? He just wanted to forget it but was unsure he ever would. After an hour of being alone and depressed, he decided to take a walk. He left his room and began exploring the many rooms and hallways. After some time, he found himself outside the building in a garden with a large pool. The natural beauty of it made him stare for several minutes. Trees, flowers, and bamboo laid before him in a scene of serenity and peace. He was taken aback by it all.
I don't want my conversation with Neela last night to get in the way of today's events. There is a reason why you were chosen for this, Vera. The Lyran possesses something special. Neela has informed me that she could feel the presence of something more in him. With your interests in necromancy, I believe you are the best pick to train him. Learn what he has seen and use that knowledge to understand why you must be careful,
Kaisha said, walking Vera down a long hallway.
I understand, Your Grace, but I have no doubt that this Lyran is going to be a hindrance on our mission. An outsider such as him cannot possibly understand our ways. It will likely get him killed or captured, then you would be forced to place judgment upon one of your Cynder. You know just as I that this secrecy is a huge setback on our order. The other Mordans see it as well. The Cynder should be by your side, not the guardsman. It has been so for 1,000 years, but things must change,
Vera said, trying to get Kaisha to understand her frustration with the order and its ways.
I understand where you are coming from, but a force such as the Cynder makes the Mordans look hostile. This could cause undue damage to the already thin relationship we have with the Orsin and humans. The humans already see us as bloodthirsty animals, and a show of force such as the Cynder would cause the Orsin to be on guard. Trade would cease. More blood would be spilled than ever before if the Orsin had a reason to protect their land, and having mages trained in assassination and in your case necromancy would only make them put up walls around their land. It's not like I don't want you at my side. You and the rest of the clan could protect this city tenfold over what the guardsmen can, but it makes the Morden appear to be seeking power over safety. We live in a time of peace and freedom. No war has broken out in 200 years. Tensions between the races are lower than ever, and our people are able to live free. I don't want to cause this to change all for something that already exists. The Cynder will protect the Fyren from the shadows as they have for 1,000 years.
Kaisha explained as they approached her chamber.
I understand, Your Grace. I will attend to my digressions as you wish,
Vera said, trying not to argue with the matriarch of Myopia more than she already had.
I see you decided to take a walk,
Neela said, approaching Fevra from behind. He turned his head and nodded with an absent mind.
This reminds me of my home. It's beautiful here. Much different than the plains I had wandered through before we met,
he said after a moment, then turned around to see Neela in full.
No need to let the past die. We all have our memories and we carry them with us as long as we live. It's best to look to the future and keep moving forward,
Neela said, and placed a hand on his shoulder to comfort him.
Your meeting is soon, we best be going,
she continued, letting just a moment of silence sit between them. Fevra nodded and smiled.
You are right,
he said, then they both left the garden. As they approached the Morden's mansion, Fevra was again shocked by the stunning beauty of the Fyren architecture. The mansion was a tower of square-like floors stacked on top of each other with slanted roofing jutting down from each floor, each held up by curling wood posts. He could see the care put into every single piece of this magnificent building and the artistry of the red and gold decorations that adorned it. They were shown through a large gate and made their way up a winding passage to the main entrance. Four guards stood at their posts, each wielding a large staff with a curved blade at its tip. Neela approached the door and the guards bowed, then opened it. Fevra followed her through the main entranceway, staring at the dozens of statues, animal hides, and paintings that adorned the walls. They made their way to a set of large doors with yet another 2 guards posted on either side. They bowed, then opened the doors to the Morden's chamber. Sitting on a wooden throne was a white-furred Fyren woman. Atop her head sat a crown made from gold that twisted and spiraled around itself. Standing next to her was an orange-furred Fyren woman dressed in the same black and gray bodysuit and black cloak that Neela wore. Vera could feel it before the doors even opened. It reverberated off the walls like thunder. She tensed up in preparation for something, but knew it wasn't a threat, at least she thought. Vera stood still, watching the male Lyran step forward. Neela approached, then kneeled.
Your Grace, I present you Fevra, a skilled hunter and newest member of the Cynder. May you find his strength as useful as I have.
Neela said, and Fevra kneeled alongside her. Vera was almost sickened by the energy that ran unchecked from his body.
Does he not know he is holding such power, or is he trying to intimidate us with it?
Vera asked herself, thinking about how she was to move forward in this situation.
I see what you meant by his potential, Neela. He holds something truly unique in a mage. Fevra, stand if you would.
Kaisha stood from her throne and walked to him. Her long black dress flowing behind her. Fevra stood and watched as the Morden walked around him, examining every aspect of his being.
Curious indeed. How has a Lyran come to be so far from the forest? I doubt you were sent here for a political purpose.
Kaisha said as she placed her hand on his jaw and moved his head around. She moved away to let him speak after a moment of looking him deep in the eyes.
No, Your Grace. I was exiled from my pack. Our law is absolute no matter the situation.
Fevra answered truthfully, only hiding the reason for his exile.
I see. And what was the cause of this exile? Drug use? Murder? Rape? Whatever it was, put it behind you. I can see great things in you, but not without work. Vera will instruct you in the arts. She will guide you and assist in your first few jobs before you are set out on your own.
Kaisha said, as she gestured toward Vera, who stepped forward and bowed.
As for you, Neela, there is a job to be finished.
Kaisha said, walking back to her throne. Neela stood, then bowed and walked out of the room. Vera stepped to Fevra and gestured for him to follow. They left the mansion and took a different path than the one Fevra had arrived at. After traveling for over an hour, they reached a small cliff at the edge of the city. Vera dismounted her horse and cast a fire spell. Her dark red color flashed to life and illuminated a small cavern hidden into the side of the cliff. Fevra followed her down a long and tight corridor until they reached a door. Vera placed her hand against the door and pressed her energy into it, and it opened, exposing the entrance to his new home. The difference between this cave and the inn Fevra had been in the day before was stark. It was dark, damp, small and cold. The main entrance was a circular room with a fire pit in the center and a few tables and chairs off to the sides. 3 paths branched off in different spots around the circle, each having a small wooden door, crudely attached to the cave wall. Vera walked to the furthest one and opened the door.
This is the living space. Given that you are the newest member, you don't get to choose which room is yours,
Vera said, and showed him down a hallway and past 4 rooms, each with their doors closed. They arrived at the last door, and Vera showed him inside. There was a drab bed made of animal furs, several shelves carved from the walls, a small table and chair, and finally a black banner that had been hung from the wall bearing a red symbol that resembled a flame.
I will get you your clothes, supplies and other things you need after our tour is finished,
Vera said, then showed him back out to the main entrance. They took the next closest path to the living quarters and walked into an open room twice the size of the main entrance. There were dozens of archery targets, punching bags, practice weapons of all types and more equipment used for training, practice and exercise. Scorch marks lined the entire room along with small cracks and pits in the stone walls and floor from uncountable times it had been struck by magic.
This is where you will train. Any job could require different things, so come here often to hone your skills,
Vera said after walking him around the room. Fevra took in the room, taking note of everything, but didn't say anything, just letting Vera do her tour. They finally made it to the last door.
This is the kitchen, and beyond that is the hot spring where you wash yourself,
she said, then walked him through the kitchen. There were several wooden cabinets and shelves stocked with an assortment of foods, bottles, and boxes. A small cooking pot over a fire pit with pots, pans, plates, bowls, and utensils hanging from the ceiling and on the shelves. They walked through the kitchen, took a right turn and entered another door to the hot spring. She showed him around the large pool of steaming water, pointing out where the towels and soaps were stored, then took him back to his room.
I will be back momentarily with your things,
Vera said, leaving him alone in the small damp room. She came back shortly carrying a bundle of gear and placed them on the table. She unrolled the cloth to show 3 bottles, a handful of small poisoner knives, a pair of the black and gray bodysuit that was common for the Cynders to wear, and a single book.
This book is mostly for entertainment since you will be stuck in here for some time. It will take around a few months to get you up to speed here, so get comfortable with your surroundings. Neela is out doing various jobs right now, but the rest of us are here. If you need anything, my room is the 5th down on this side. Takashi has the room next to you and Cress is outside tending to the garden,
Vera explained as Fevra picked up his things and examined each one.
What are the bottles for?
He asked, curiously.
They will be used for poison. I suggest marking each bottle with a symbol to differentiate them from the others you will receive over time,
Vera answered sarcastically and left the room. Fevra didn't know what was happening. Vera came off as if she had been given a death sentence by being his partner. She was cold and sarcastic towards him without any real reason. Perhaps she was just like that, but it was a far cry from his experience with Neela, who was nothing but kind to him. He would have to be at his best to please Vera. He picked up the book and noted the name on the cover. The Lost City of Necrogrove, it read in common, so he opened the book and began reading. Several paragraphs in, he knew that this wasn't just some fairy tale, but a historical documentation of a city that had long ago disappeared within the Gorewood forest. As he read further into the book, he noticed a pattern of marked passages, each of which had some sort of mention or allusion towards necromancy. He was no expert on the dark matter, but from what he did know, necromancy was agreed upon by all mageborn to be blasphemous in the practice of color.
Was the Cynder something more, or was there nothing to this?
He wondered, then placed the book down. He decided that putting on his new bodysuit was his next step and quickly changed. It was odd going from the loose and comfortable fine clothing from the inn to this skin-tight suit and long black cloak. It felt tight and yet unrestrictive. He could move more freely without the baggy clothes he had always worn in comparison to these. The cloak's hood had slits cut out for his ears, although they were in the wrong place, most likely because it was designed for a fireman. He picked up a knife and slipped it into a pocket the exact shape and size of it. He tested his movements with the knife tucked away, and still he felt as if he had nothing weighing him down. After a few minutes of examining his body, tucking his ears into the hood and placing each knife in its designated pocket, he opened up his aura to his surroundings. He could feel the few Cynders that remained behind through the walls, like they were right next to him. This was the first time since his trip with Neela that he used his color, and it hit him like a brick. The explosion of energy that he took in was astonishing. He could feel the subtle movements of Vera, who was just a few doors away. The calm pulse of his neighbor's breathing and the leftover energy that had resided on every inch of the practice room. He felt more uncomfortable than ever before, knowing that this was what he would be feeling every time he used color here. He missed the expansive and untamed feeling of the forest more than ever. Vera had been gone for only a few minutes, and he was getting a bit antsy. It wasn't the kind of feeling he liked, but he needed to settle everything he had been feeling. Nervousness, anxiety, and depression washed over him and made him feel like he didn't belong here. He continued to read for some time before a knock rapped against his door. He expected it to be Vera, but when it didn't open, he stood up and opened the door himself. He looked down to see a Fyron just a bit shorter than Vera, wearing a tight black and gray shirt with a cloak, a black and gray mini skirt with long stockings reaching mid-thigh, each being supported by a thin strap that attached onto something under the skirt, and a pair of black boots.
Hello there, I'm Cress. I felt a new source of color from the garden and just knew I had to meet its source.
Cress said excitedly, almost prancing around the hall and making exaggerated movements.
I'm Fevra and nice to meet you, Cress.
He replied, being taken aback by the extreme excitement the Fyron had shown.
Come with me, I'll show you the garden and get to know you better,
Cress said, extending a hand out. Fevra hesitated for a moment before he spoke.
I was told by Vera that if I needed anything to speak to you or Takashi, so sure take me to the garden. It beats reading this book,
he said, then tossed the book onto the bed and took Cress's hand. Cress blushed as their hands touched, then they walked through the halls and out to the main entrance.
Vera's a bit cold and sarcastic. You'll learn in time that she has her bright side. Takashi is pretty plain. He never really says much and sticks to his room where he sleeps a lot, so you probably won't really see him much,
Cress said excitedly as they left the tunnel and out into nature.
There are 5 members of the Myopia Cynder. Each of us brings something unique to the family. I am an expert in plants and potions, Vera is the best combatant and specialist in necromancy, which between you and me is just horrifying, and Takashi has the best training in color. As for you, well, there has never been a liar in Cynder before, so just that makes you special,
Cress said with a cute smile that washed away some of Fevra's anxiousness.
I am an excellent hunter. That was my duty in the forest. I could track my prey for days if needed, and I always got the kill. Perhaps I could become the best tracker,
Fevra said, now allowing Cress to lead him without feeling nervous. They arrived at a small clearing with a shack in the center and rows upon rows of different plants.
I think you could be the best of every branch. I can just tell,
Cress said after turning to him and looking up into his eyes.
Neela, Vera and even the Mordants say they can see something in me. I'm not sure what that something is, but I will do my best. I am not the best person in the world, I've made so many mistakes, but if they can see potential in me, then I will make their decision to bring me in one they won't be ashamed of,
Fevra said, trying to wrap his mind around his future and the potential he could have in his new life.
It's not just them that can see something in you. I can feel this pressure around you. It's something special. Something very unique. I can't explain what it is. It's not your color. That in itself is taking my breath away. It feels like you have this power that you don't have control over. It's intoxicating,
Cress said, then trailed off as if she had said too much.
Shouldn't you be tending to the nightshade? We need the poison by tomorrow,
Vera said, breaking the moment with a harsh tone.
You just have to ruin my fun,
Cress said, stepping away from Fevra.
What is fun to you might not be fun for others. I can tolerate the clothing and your personality, but we don't need there to be drama between you when you get your fun. I am sure you didn't tell him yet, did you?
Vera said, staring daggers at Cress.
I was going to,
Cress replied, folding her arms.
Your marks are one thing, but a fellow Cynder? I don't care either way, but if my student isn't in top form tomorrow, you will be cleaning my clothes for a month. Fevra, after Cress shows you the garden, meet me in the training room, and Cress, I hope you are truthful with your new clan brother. I don't want to be involved any further than this,
Vera said, then walked away with a look of both disgust and humor.
What did she mean by that?
Fevra asked.
It's nothing. Let's just forget this and move on.
I hope you can see I was not trying to force you. I'm sorry.
It's fine,
Cress replied as she turned away from him. Fevra studied the girl before him with confused interest. She was cute and almost innocent in her demeanor, yet had spent her entire life training to be a killer. He couldn't understand the complexities of what that would do to someone, however he was interested in learning everything he could. They stood for some time in awkward silence, before Cress finally moved forward. Gesturing her head for him to follow, they made their way into a small hut with a glass roof. They stepped inside and the humidity slammed into Fevra with force.
We grow most of our own poisonous and toxic plants here, however some of the more potent ones can't grow in this climate,
Cress explained as she stepped around the hut. Fevra looked around with curiosity as he took in the familiar plants he had known from the evergreen. His eyes caught a particular pink flower with fine hair like thorns on its stem and stopped.
Haven stem?
Vera smoked most of what we had last month, but I was able to save this one before she could get to it. Luckily I have plenty of seeds, but with their long growth cycle it's going to be a while before our stocks are back to normal.
I've only had it once. My father was so pissed when he caught me,
Fevra said as he reminisced about his youth.
Well, maybe when it buds we could share a cigarette, if you want,
Cress replied with a small smile. The beauty of this smile made his heart race and his face to burn under his fur. It was as if the very sight of her smiling was a gift from the gods.
I would like that.
He replied awkwardly, and Cress tilted her head.
Are you okay?
Yeah. Sorry. I know several of these plants already, but these are all new to me.
He replied quickly. Cress eyed him over for a moment, then moved closer. Pulling a potted flower down from a shelf, she leaned into him for just a moment. Her perfume and warmth shot shivers down his back. They stood inches away, and despite his several feet of height over her they locked eyes. They stared for several moments as if they both were trying to make a decision, but it was Fevra who turned away first.
Sorry.
He said softly, and Cress turned to the nightshade before her.
I'll have this finished in a few minutes. Let Vera know that I'll bring it to her.
Cress replied, and Fevra nodded silently. He stepped out of the greenhouse trying to understand what had just happened. His mind was racing and his heart was fighting to burst from his chest. He shook his head and made his way back into the cave, both excited and dreading his future.